Hello and welcome back. I once travelled to the Arctic Circle in February and experienced life with minimal natural light. I was with a group of professional musicians who were playing in the exquisite ice cathedral in Tromsø. And there's so much that I could say about this beautiful experience, but for this post, I'm focusing on the light. The light in Tromsø was hazy at best, and reality really felt quite dreamlike. When we were outdoors, but indoors, of course, artificial lighting made everything feel completely normal. On another trip, which was this time to Helsinki, again in February, the darkness, like the snow, felt very permanent, and there was a fleeting sense of the light, but it kind of disappeared as soon as it had registered with me. I was attending a meeting to discuss masterclasses in conservatoires, and much to our surprise, our fabulous hosts ordered coffee and chocolate cake and red wine every 2 hours from the beginning of the morning all the way through to the end of the afternoon. And we asked them about this, and they explained that this was actually really important because it helped to maintain serotonin levels. The long winters take their toll on health and well-being in the northern latitudes, and by sort of consuming chocolate cake, coffee and red wine, they had found that this was a really good way to keep serotonin levels healthy. Light doesn't only help us to see, it also tells our body when to wake, when to rest and when to repair. Researchers agree that our bodies can almost tell the time using our natural responses to light. Changes in light intensity are picked up through photosensitive rods and cones in the retina of the eye. These special cells contain the photopigment called melanopsin, and it's sensitive to short-wave light in particular. These cells send signals to the master circadian clock in the brain. It's housed in the hypothalamus in a particular nucleus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, known for short with the acronym SCN. This sensory information about light is also relayed to the other circadian clocks in the brain, and also the endocrine system and systems that give us our states of alertness, including serotonergic tone. Those who study seasonality of moods and seasonal affective disorder find that serotonin production is related to the hours of sunlight. Of course, mood is not only influenced by light, but also by other factors such as alertness and attention and anxiety, in addition to the neurotransmitters such as dopamine, serotonin, and noradrenaline. Isn't it so remarkable how our bodies are finely entrained to the light-dark cycles of day and night and seasonality? Here in London and the UK, we do feel the seasonal changes in light, even though we are so far south when compared with Helsinki and Tromsø. So what is really happening? Well, there are 3 real changes. First of all, we have reduced hours of sunlight. Secondly, we have lower light intensity even at midday. And thirdly, we have a lower proportion of short-wave blue light. Now, the reduction in shortwave blue light is key because this is what we need to keep our internal circadian clock synchronized with the light and dark cycle of the external environment, and also to prime the complex clock system of our internal biology. The optimal functioning of our cells and organs is orchestrated by the central clock in the hypothalamus. And this in itself is primed by the light sensitivity of the retinal cells of our eyes. Norwegian researchers described alertness as following a circadian rhythm. It begins low in the morning, but builds during the day and drops off again in the evening and at night. The researchers described how alertness could be increased and drowsiness could be decreased by using shortwave enriched white light. And they investigated the effects of light on attention levels in students. And the light improved attention and alertness, but there was no statistically significant difference between the effect of shortwave or longwave light. Now, Swedish researchers have studied office workers and they found that alertness in wintertime was related to whether they had a 30-minute exposure to light during their lunch break. In other words, whether they got out during lunch. The benefits were found to last for an hour after returning to their workspace. And these studies point to the importance of getting outdoors every day and making the most of midwinter light. But the more nuanced data suggests that the change in light quality in the afternoon is really important. For example, the retinal cells are, as we know, sensitive to shortwave blue light in the morning, but they're not so sensitive in the late afternoon. So this is why we benefit from early morning light exposure. Our circadian system has evolved to detect particular light qualities in the morning, but not later in the day. In other words, our circadian amplitude and our wave of alertness may flatten in the winter because we're exposed to less light, but it does retain its essential rhythm. Let's think about the rhythm of rest and repair. If our alertness feels flat and the motivation to be productive has dropped off, this is what nature intended. The lower light signals are aligned with scarcity of food and a season of replenishment rather than plenty. We are learning that fasting is a natural state in which our bodies can run maintenance and repair programs as we sleep. And of course, in our Western culture, there's an expectation that productivity remains the same all year round and that we override the natural rhythms of rest and repair. There's a sense of safety in routines and familiar patterns because these conserve energy and ensure time for rest. And I think that this is probably something that we are aware of at this time of year. In terms of data, there's little evidence that we're influenced by seasonal light changes because exposure to artificial light protects us from this. A researcher called Professor Dunster showed that exposure to artificial light in the autumn and winter months affects the sleep-wake cycle, with students delaying their sleep and waking up later in the morning. They also showed that exposure to daylight can prevent this level of circadian disruption. This is important and it really matters because circadian disruption is not only a matter of a shift in the body clock, but it's also a change to the very delicate balance and the synchrony of the organs in the body. You see, most organs of the body have got their own clock system, which responds to the light-dark circadian rhythms of the hypothalamus, the central clock. But there are even more clocks. There are little clocks that govern individual cells of the body. So if you can imagine that all of this has to be orchestrated and coordinated, we don't really want to be messing with this clock. So let's take a reflective moment. Thinking about the quietness, the darkness, and the scarcity of food in nature at this time of year, it really does make sense that this was a time for rest, recuperation, and retreat for our ancestors. Our 24/7 culture tends to encourage the non-stop effort, and this is possible to sustain for a while, but not much longer. So rather than heading at full speed towards depletion, let's think about rhythmic poise and introduce a reflective moment. In the classroom, this might translate into perhaps thinking about consolidation and perhaps celebrating all the effort and the steps that have been taken during the year since September or maybe even since January. How many categories of recognition might there be? Many schools recognise endeavour in so many different domains: academic, sport, music, drama, and so on. But as well as all these obvious accomplishments, it's also very important to celebrate moments that are more interpersonal, things like moments of kindness, moments of bravery, and moments where everything just felt very funny. Just as the light returns after winter, so too can our energy and creativity when we honour the rhythm of rest. If you'd like to explore how rhythm can support focus, flow, and learning in your classroom, the Rhythm for Reading CPD course is now open for January enrolment. I hope to see you there. Bye for now.